Alright, this is the end of factor by grouping. And we're doing the same thing. We're doing the GCF of your first two terms and then the GCF of the last two terms. I'm going to rewrite this so it's a little bigger. Now the first two examples that we did in factor by grouping, our middle term, or our middle sign, the sign that we were bringing down was a plus sign. It's a little different when you bring down a minus sign. So I want to remind you of what sign I'm talking about. This sign here was a plus, and now notice that it is a minus. So when it's a minus, this is going to change a couple of things. So let's do the same thing we were doing before. We're going to do the GCF of the first two terms. So the GCF of the first two terms is actually going to be an x squared. So when I factor out an x squared, I'm going to be left with 3 minus 2 is 1. The 4 is just going to come down and the x squares are going to cancel out. So when I take out an x squared, I'm going to be left with x plus 4. Now when I bring down a minus sign, it changes my second sign to the opposite. So you don't even have to worry about the sign you're bringing down, because whatever this is, you're actually going to bring down the opposite sign, whatever this sign is here. So the reason for this is because remember when you distribute and it changes all the signs to the opposite? That's kind of what's happening here, because remember you're undoing the multiplication. So anytime you have a minus sign in between, it changes your second sign to the opposite. So the GCF of the 6x minus 24, the biggest thing that will go into both 6 and 24 is 6. And I'm going to be left with x, and 6 will go into 24 4 times. The reason why I couldn't take a GCF of x out, remember, is because there's not an x in both groups. Now remember, I have an x plus 4 that's the same, so I'm going to take out an x plus 4, and I'm left with x squared minus 6, and that's in factored form. Now we have one more to do. I have 3x squared plus 15x plus x plus 5. And so my GCF of my first two terms, I have 3x squared plus 15x. The GCF of the numbers is 3. The GCF of the variables is x. When I factor that out, I'm left with x plus 5. 3 will go to 3 and cancel out. If I take 1x from 2, I'm left with 1. 3 will go to 15 5 times, and the x's cancel. Now notice there's a plus sign here, so I can just bring that down. And then the GCF of the last two terms, they have nothing in common, the x and the 5. So that's going to give me a GCF of 1. And if you have a GCF of 1, you just rewrite everything as it is. Okay? The x plus 5 match. So I'm going to take out my x plus 5, and I'm left with 3x plus 1. And this is in factored form. So this is the end of 4.1, GCF and factor by grouping. If you have any problems in your homework, let me know.